Okay, so a pretty serious development in regards to Cyberpunk 2077. It seems that its quote-unquote biggest DLC leak to date was nothing more than a big fat lie, and likely just a way for a scammer to make some money from people who were eagerly anticipating some new content in their favorite game. We have to talk about that. There's this huge expose over on Reddit, as well as where the heck is CD Projekt Red into all of this. It's been so long since we heard any news. There's a lot of people that are waiting for some DLCs, for some new content. There was also that lead quest designer that was kind of hinting towards some stuff happening at the end of July. Well, it's already August and yeah, nothing on the horizon. So let's talk about that and more in this video, starting with this exposing the fake Epic Games Store data mines thread over on Reddit. By the way, huge shout out to Romulus is back because he went above and beyond gathering evidence and kind of exposing these data mines for what they were, which were nothing but big fat lies. And we're gonna start things off with the most recent one, which was posted yesterday but since then been deleted by the same leaker. We do luckily have a bunch of snapshots here that I remember seeing this thread and I thought from the beginning that it was pretty ridiculous. I mean, it was easy to see from a mile away that this was fake, as it was claiming that Cyberpunk 2077, of all games, a single player offline game, would somehow get a scheduled server downtime for a supposed final QA build for the upcoming update, which might be 1.3 according to the same leak. Again, this was easily noticeable as a fake from a mile away, since this game, Cyberpunk 2077, has nothing to do with servers whatsoever, or at very least nothing in terms of its functionality depends on server uptime. There's other pieces of evidence in there as well, as Romulus correctly points out. The first and most important is that if there was indeed a scheduled maintenance done and the servers were kept offline even for a minute, it would definitely show up in the Epic Games public status page, which in its past incident section you can see that there's no reports for July 31st. And I mean, yeah, it makes absolutely a lot of sense, and all of the services were pretty much up through the entire ordeal. Another damning piece of evidence, the same user reports, is that if CD Projekt Red were to push out a QA update during that same period, they would do so on all platforms, including Steam itself. And you guys already know that we kept a close eye on the Steam database. It's been like something that we've been covering in multiple videos, and we covered it every single time there was a branch update for the testing branch. Well, there's no new updates for it since at least 3 days ago, which would be July 29, so 2 days before that supposed scheduled maintenance, and nothing since then has been done, so definitely nothing on July 31st. But here is where it all ties in and what the reason behind all of this is, which is of course trying to get some money out of people who want to see stuff earlier than the developers are posting. So when one of the users proceeds to ask him for a link to the Epic Games server downtime report in that thread we were talking about, in the now deleted comments he made a claim that he has access to an Epic Games developer backend, which can only be accessed through a dev account, and with it you can see all future content planned for games by their respective developers. Which, I mean, you don't have to be an expert to realize this is completely false. You definitely don't get access to other companies like future plans even if you use the same platform. It definitely makes no sense, and you would definitely not have this kind of crystal ball and this kind of access to something that is a confidential information and potentially could even get you like a really big fine or like a really big lawsuit, if not even maybe some jail time. But yeah, he made that argument. Suffice to say that he was essentially, advertising this program that he supposedly created, this Epic Inspector tool that would be giving him developer access to the back end of the Epic Games servers and kind of seeing what these developers were posting, which again makes no sense, but apparently there were some people that bought into that. So we will talk about that in just a little bit, but essentially what this means is that literally the entire first batch of like the DLC leaks was nothing more than an elaborate fake, and that was pretty much it. So everything from like the Ripper Dock expansion, the body shops, and the fashion forward, the gangs of Night City, body of Chrome, and all of that, these were supposedly just elaborate fakes that everybody fell into. Now the only remaining question is, what about these other DLCs that we've seen and covered previously, like DLC 1 to 17 that were kind of indicating, you know, some possible new items in the game, new gigs that we've talked previously about. These could also be faked at the same time, so this is why I mentioned previously, where is CD Projekt Red into all of this? They should definitely come in and maybe like not fully head on clarify or even address these leaks, because it would be a waste of time. But what about just putting it all to rest with an updated roadmap, or maybe an updated situation of what they are doing right now, kind of like what they did before update 1.2. They released a series of blog posts where they talked about what they were working on and what it's about to happen with the game, what was the purpose of the next update, which back then was 1.2. So I would like to see something like that, but a little bit more extensive, and in order to put people's minds at ease. And like the icing on top is the fact that some of the users who did indeed pay for this service, probably just like a morbid curiosity to see how far this goes, did expose the same leaker, the same fake leaker. So get that, the leaker gets leaked himself. But the user then replies, well, the file in the image is the hex value of update point pack. It's an MP4 file, which is like super funny. It's just like a random ass file that has nothing to do with anything, but then yeah, the leaker backtracks a little bit. So let me ask other devs what they know of this. I don't remember adding an MP4 file. Yeah, definitely backpedaling over there. The update file wasn't supposed to be included with Cybermod. It's part of a frameshift service and it's not being utilized by Cybermod. You can delete it. But then there's another series of replies. Neither is assets pack or config pack. Neither of these are being utilized. The program, it runs the same with or without them, which makes me think they're just dummy files. And it goes on and on. The same backer completely dismantles every single bit of, you know, like argument that this leaker has. Sorry for the skepticism, by the way. I hope you know that I'm not trying to attack you, but the whole project is closed source and you're not being very transparent about what's actually doing on a technical side. And then further goes on to explain to him that he also finds the previous statement, compressing things that are out of FOV, a bit questionable, because the game already has occlusion and frustum culling implemented in it, and compressing textures does not increase performance in any way generally. They create a performance overhead and in turn reduce VRAM and RAM usage, but it shouldn't matter anyway because the game does have culling methods implemented to begin with. And there's a few more in there that I believe I saw with some of these backers already, you know, talking about these leaks and the fact that this was all pretty much a ruse. The end result was the fact that he was gathering these donations to kind of, you know, fund whatever he was trying to do, which I guess was maybe buying some coffee at the expense of some people who were eagerly waiting for their favorite game to finally get an update. At the same time, there was this different thread this time around about those free DLCs from the data miner, about the clarification of the 4 missions that were data mined and were deemed as quote-unquote playable, though not really, because you kind of need a bit of modding and a little bit of knowledge to bypass some of the restrictions from those missions, which are clearly not ready yet. But some of the conclusions from the same thread were as follows. So DLCs, large story-based expansions, etc. are planned ahead of time. Think of this as TV shows. They do not get all seasons of the show at once. The gaming industry has adopted the practice of DLC, which expands upon the base content. Some of the most absurd complaints I have come across reads somewhere at the extent of, why aren't the large expansions of the game a part of the base game itself? It's quite shocking, according to the same user. A game development doesn't work that way, not with the standards that we have today. Yes, some content does not end up in the base game simply because of lack of time, polish, etc., all of which can be applied to the unused street stories that, we talked about previously, but cdpr is probably going to provide these gigs in a more polished and in a complete state later down the line for free. I do not understand why people are so upset about this. I am also seeing some YouTubers creating clickbait out of this, which is shameful, and I'm kind of also a little bit, a little bit guilty of that, because I've covered these previously, but only in the context of the fact that they were in the game and they raised the question that if they are in the game? Will they be part of DLC? Are they cut content? And it was just like general questions that the fan base already had, and kind of exploring the potential reasons for why CD Projekt Red has done this, not in an accusatory kind of way, if it makes any sense. Now, on a final note, there was also this topic of discussion regarding Cyberpunk 2077 being way off schedule for a No Man's Sky style comeback. Of course, Paul Tassi making the point that CD Projekt Red being 7 months out after the release of their game is nowhere near close to how Hello Games was back in 2016, and by that point they were already planning for their third expansion or third DLC or third update, which was back then, well, Atlas Rises. They were getting ready for the summer release a few months after that. Well, there's a few things that I will want to mention in regards to this. Of course, all of this does not completely exclude CD Projekt Red not doing a comeback for Cyberpunk 2077, especially since we do know from official sources and the lead quest designer mentioning that they are definitely working on something big. But I think that the comparison doesn't, well, make sense in this case, especially since No Man's Sky definitely did not redeem itself by its first year. It was still heavily criticized, and even the first 3 updates, which were quite significant and still added a lot to the main gameplay, were not enough in most players' eyes, and definitely a far cry from a full comeback. Actually, the full comeback happened, I would argue, around 2018 with the release of the next update, and I would even argue further that a year later with the Beyond update in 2019 is when the true comeback actually became complete, and only then the full revamp of the game started happening. And from there on, it was just like the cherry on top. Every single update since then that we've seen in the past couple of years were just adding on top of an already a, well, pretty great base of a game that we had, but that was because it got countless updates over several years, not just 7 months. So it could totally happen the same for Cyberpunk 2077, to wait for a little bit longer before it sees its full redemption arc. At the same time, yes, you can argue that CD Projekt Red is behind schedule with a proper update cycle, and I would also agree with that. But at the same time, I wonder, is it not on a different scale? Like, isn't Cyberpunk 2077 on a completely different scale than No Man's Sky is, and way more ambitious? Because releasing a No Man's Sky update, I would argue, is not as complicated as it is for CD Projekt Red to release something in terms of new content. And I would also add to that the fact that the expectation for a proper DLC or new content is far higher for Cyberpunk than it was for No Man's Sky. Even to this day, the same old saying that No Man's Sky is a large ocean with a really shallow depth, it's not too far off. I mean, some of the systems are new and flashy, but when you look at them, they aren't too deep, and even I have to agree with that, even though No Man's Sky was one of my main, and still is one of my main content that I cover here on this channel. So it all matters of the perspective. I don't think Cyberpunk is too far off, and I don't think it's way behind schedule when it comes to these releases. And of course, we also have to take into account that things changed over the past year, well, actually couple of years, with everything that's been going on and people staying at home. But maybe that's just me. This is it though. Thanks so much for watching, and I'll see you guys next time.